So there's a lot of news. There's no COVID news. So first of all, so I have three large topics. We're going to talk about them in a different way. So first, the kind of political news is that the National Center for Integrative Health and Medicine is getting shut down by administration. It's not clear. It's part of the 4 centers being closed down as part of an NIH restructuring, which was announced just a couple of days ago. It's not clear if the functions of the center will be moved. It's not clear if all the grants that were supporting mostly academic institutions to research alternative medicine will be shut down or not. I don't know any details. So of course, it's very sad I've had a meeting just recently with the executive director of the consortium, and I will clarify details as they come, but I don't have anything else to add. But if you are going to see this in the news, I thought that I would give you a heads up first. It's hard to keep glass half full right now, but I'm with Janet, so maybe something good will come out of it. Time will show whether or not they'll try to somehow change something. I don't know. Obviously, it's also very weird because we were expecting NCCIH to be boosted by current administration, completely get restructured and removed, because that's the memo that was circulated, that the center will cease to exist as of the end of this year. So that's news number one. News number two, I just recently recorded a video, which is not yet edited and on YouTube, about the study that just came out, I think about 4 weeks ago, on link between CAT scans and future cancers. So what I'm going to do, actually, I'm just going to summarize it. And then what I'll do is when the video is up, I'll give you the links and everything, because I don't want us to spend a lot of time on this. But I'm expecting some questions about this. And also some of you may already have seen the study and may have questions. So we, in 2023, according to this most recent JAMA article, there was over 90 million CAT scans done in America, in US, and the projection is that this is going to cause 100,000 new cancers in the subsequent years. Now, the study is very detailed about what kind of cancers are more likely than others, what are the projections in terms of timing, how far delayed this effect's going to be, how is this different between different ages groups, including pediatric, including children. So there's a lot of details which I'm not showing you now, and the video just explains some of the most important parts. And also the video will explain how is the CAT scan radiation compares to lots of other x-rays, like a mammogram and the chest x-ray and the DEXA scan, and even going through the airport security, so that everybody's on the same page about this. But just to tell you, in 2023 alone, just to get an idea, there were approximately 2 million new cases of cancer. So if you think about this, that if that 100,000 will apply per year, right? Because the CAT scans are not just like one time and then they stop. They're continuously being done every year. So if you say that, okay, it's going to add, so this is basically what that does. It's 1/20th roughly of all cancers in existence are from our healthcare system, from us ordering CAT scans. Authors go on to say that, of course, from philosophic perspective, proving harm versus immediate benefit of something is not in the same category, right? Because if somebody is dying from some acute problem like a car accident, then you have to find out whether they need immediate intervention, and that requires a CAT scan. There's not going to be a discussion what will be the delayed radiation impact of that. But there's a lot of CAT scans that are done, for not necessarily all that clear reasons. Sometimes they're done because patient fell down and they may have hit their head, but there's no obvious bleeding on the patient, and the physician in emergency room just doesn't want to deal with the situation. It's easier for them to get a CAT scan, make sure there's no bleeding, and send the patient home. So a lot of the tests are done, and it's hard to estimate what proportion of this test is actually truly clinically critically important versus not. And of course, that article that I'm mentioning, it was not designed to detect this or to analyze this. So I'll analyze this more. I'm wondering if folks have questions about this. They probably do. And so by all means, put them in the chat. And the third topic that I was going to discuss, actually, I'm at 2:11. We're going to discuss it next time. I don't want to take more time because we're going to run out of time. So it's a smaller issue. So, okay. So let's do the questions. You guys know the drill. Drop the questions in the chat. What is this? Good memories. Okay, I'm not sure what this means. Okay. When does fundraising begins? I don't know what that applies to. Sorry, I must have missed something that was said earlier.
It applies to the GWCIM.
GWCIM. You mean the aim?
Yes, it applies to the shutdown.
Well, it's NIH that's getting shut down. National Center for Integrative Health and Medicine getting shut down. This has nothing to do with fundraising.
I thought that it was because of that you were getting shut down. I misunderstood.
Yeah, no, we're operating as usual. Nothing is different with us. I was just sorry. Yeah, no, it's a memo that was first leaked to me a couple of days ago, and then this was just publicly announced recently. So there's nothing that I cannot disclose since this is already in public domain. Yeah, so the one thing is, we all knew, right, that NIH changes are coming. The government had announced this quite a while ago. It just nobody knew what that will entail, like what would those changes be. But they're now officially reported their 4 centers or offices will become permanently shut down, and NCCIH is one of them. Now, what that shutdown means, what will happen with all the grants? There are obviously millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in grants, and all of that. I don't have any slightest idea, and that's why I'm saying I don't know. So, okay, you guys want the link to the study, so give me a second. I will find it. Meantime, we can go back to other questions. And actually, what I also can do, I'm going to put quick summary for you guys that ChatGPT generated. That's kind of quick read, but why not? Well, this is what I will include with my talk, because I just felt that was, oh, I cannot do that because, okay. Right, I'll just remove some of this stuff to fit. Apparently, if you can't copy paste too much into the chat here, there's a limit. And then the actual link to the study. Where's the link to the study? Okay, here it is. Okay. Right. I think this data will probably trigger, in my opinion, a number of large next steps. I presume that we will be seeing similar type of studies done with other X-rays, and I think that'll be very helpful. It'll be helpful to understand if this relates to other things. That's good. You're right. So MRIs are probably going to be a whole lot safer. The MRIs have their own issues, right? So MRIs are not always the right test for certain things. MRIs are very long tests compared to CAT scans. So, like, for example, CAT scan could take a couple of minutes versus MRI may take 45 minutes. So there's also an issue of complexity of administration of a test and a cost. CAT scans are dramatically cheaper. I, for example, did a recent CAT scan electively, but this is a heart CAT scan, and I actually do compare in the video that. So the heart CAT scan is dramatically less radiation compared to the regular CAT scan because it's what's called a low resolution. It's almost 10 times lower radiation amount. But nonetheless, it's still. So I chose to do it because I felt that amount of radiation was warranted for me as I'm embarking on some additional training, and I wanted to understand my cardiovascular risks better. So, all right, let's go back to questions. Let's see if I covered everything. So yeah, sometimes the CT will not show an early stroke, nor will MRI. So that's a limitation of the technology. Often what they would do is they would repeat several MRIs. And often, again, and that's actually a good point, quite often in the cases like this, there will be serial CAT scans in the hospital, 2, 3, or more. So there are some patients who are getting a large number of tests in a very brief period of time. And I didn't read the full details in a description at the end, making discussion about it. I don't think they really discussed this, but you can imagine that patients like this would be at dramatically higher risk. So, but interestingly, the risk tapers off when somebody passes 80 because this only makes sense. These cancers are not going to appear overnight, right? They're going to take years, if not decades, before they show up after each episode of radiation. And so, if somebody's life expectancy is only a few years, you're not going to necessarily put them in the same risk category as somebody who's, let's say, 30. All right. Okay. Thank you, Elva. So, CJ, I know it's a personal question, but I'll quickly answer. Don't do CAT scans for surveillance of this. You can easily do MRIs for sure, especially if MRI does not require contrast. So the trick here, MRI with contrast is bad. CAT scan is bad. So what do you do? Well, you try to either do ultrasound or you try to do MRI without contrast. So those are the two preferred tests when you're surveying things. What's new in this? The sheer volume. Back in the day, the relationship and the proportion of causality of cancers was not clear. There was an indication that there's an increased risk, but it was never shown to be this high. So 100,000 a year is a very, very high number. I mean, you're talking, as I said, you're talking 5% of all the cancers caused by a single CAT scan. Now, you can imagine if somebody had 10 CAT scans, now their risk is 50% if you follow this logic. So the volume was presumed to be dramatically lower. I heard numbers like 0.1%. I heard some people were saying 1 in 1,000. So that's even less. So, now you're talking 5%. That's 1 in 20. That is a completely unexpected finding, I would say. I definitely was shocked by this personally. I don't know, there's a link. Let me see if I can click on this quickly and figure out what's what. Yeah, I haven't seen this study yet. 1 in 4 seems to be unreasonably elevated. This is not a clinical study. This looks like a Yahoo News, which I don't know. And this is 2023. Please ignore this. This has nothing to do with anything. This was one of the earlier findings that I don't think was never found out. It's one thing where you have some autoimmunity component. What does that mean in the long run? Who knows what it means in the long run, right? So in fact, they're potentially assessing simply the same thing happens after the COVID. So if you take a regular population, you give them something, you put an intervention in, and you're starting to look for what happens after, you have to really compare that to the target group you're looking at. So if you're looking at a shot versus having a COVID, I will tell you that the COVID spikes immunity way more. There's no discussion about it. Now, what is that exact number and what does this 1 out of 4 means? I have no idea, and I will not go and figure it out. It's a waste of my time. And I recommend you not to waste yours. Why? Because it's not a hard outcome. I mean, okay, so there's some changes in antibody responses, some changes in autoimmunity. Unless, we talked a little bit about this last time, unless you're a scientist and immunologist who's really interested in this, don't geek out. It's not going to help you. It's not going to really link it to the direct side effects. It's really difficult to translate that to the hardcore outcomes, like, well, forget the mortality, that's even harder. But just like, what is the risk of autoimmune diseases, for example, after that? We know it's increased, but it's definitely not increased by, 25%. It's going to be increased lower than risk. But again, we know this is this is not deniable. No one is arguing over it. The question is, those who never had any shots and then they got a COVID, how do you compare those people to those who got shots? I don't know. My gut feeling is don't worry about it. And it's probably going to be similar, if not better. So I'm not worried. I'm especially not worried about people who just got the first series. If you're getting multiple shots afterwards, yes, that may be a little trickier because each time you get that shot, you are triggering immune system again. We don't know what the frequency of us getting COVID in the future going to be, right? So a lot of people, most people here probably had it at least once. Some people had it more than once, let's say twice. Very few people had it a lot more than twice, but some have. I will tell you anecdotally, we're seeing a tremendous amount of autoimmune disorders after people had 3 or 4 COVIDs. Would have they done better if they would have gotten the shots? I don't know. I'm not going to try to speculate. I don't have numbers to report. I don't know how to even look at this. We're gonna live through this. We'll understand this more and more. Randy, you're not. It's correct. It's 1 in 620, but you have to compare that to the total number of cases of cancer in U.S. per year, and that's about 2 million. So if you get 100,000 roughly, it's actually more than 100,000. I think it's like 108 or something. It doesn't. So let's say you get 100,000, but your background amount per, and you can Google it, and it's a little bit less than 2 million in the same year in 2023. So that adds up to being about 5% of all the cancers. So right. We're at 2:22. We're out of time. Hold your questions to next time. It gives me a tremendous pleasure to have who I call my DC parent, Jack Mangold, who is a therapist and a spiritual guide and Sufi and 10,000 other things, and actually a wonderful helper who probably helped more of my home projects than I can remember over the decades. And so it's a very, very special treat we have that I have no idea what he's going to talk about, but whatever he's going to talk about is going to be interesting. So I welcome you, Jack, and take it on.
Thanks, Misha. It really is good to be here, and hi to everybody. And what I'm going to talk about today is something that has really helped me a lot and might help me to tell you a little bit about a little more that how Misha has actually helped me a lot. I had a diagnosis of toxin-related dementia a couple of years ago, and had entered into partly the Bredesen protocol and some other mold-related treatments. And one of the things that is also working for me is starting to identify this underlying level of anxiety that my body feels. And what has helped me a lot is what I'm going to talk about today, which is in a sense, a reframing of information and frankly, things you already know. And that's the new look at the parasympathetic nervous system, in fact, the whole autonomic nervous system and how it functions in us, and how it helps me to deal with the fact that for a lot of reasons that I'm easily triggered and can go into a state of, I wouldn't call it anxiety, but sort of like a low-level excitation. And I saw a blurb, and don't ask me to verify it, but Dr. Aurelia Schwartz put it out that not being in a state of autonomic regulation is akin to smoking 11 cigarettes a day. So you can either buy that or not. But let me talk a little bit about what I've discovered. And frankly, I've been looking at it for a long time. And we have about 15 minutes, and it usually takes me about 6 hours to explain this. So I'll do my best to shorten it. But you all know that the autonomic nervous system is basically comprised of the parasympathetic and sympathetic systems. And we used to do, either rest and digest or fight, flight, or freeze. And of course, there's a lot of more iterations about that. But Steve Porges, in some really interesting work, sort of reframed the whole process. And by reframe, I mean, he said, well, what's really going on here? And he was actually working with neonatal studies and began to notice that rest and digest could also mean death. like if you were in a certain part of your parasympathetic nervous system, it could shut you down to the point of dying. And he said, what's that about? Because it's supposed to be healing and regenerative and stuff. And so they began an exploration. And what he came up with was this basically a look at the evolutionary aspect of the autonomic nervous system and the fact that the parasympathetic really has two branches, dorsal and ventral. And I'll get into that in a minute. But by the way, any questions you might have, save for later, because I'm going to be just on a roll here. So I won't be able to easily come back to it if I had to stop and answer a question, but I will give time for questions. So what happens is in an evolutionary basis, our dorsal, or the branch of the sympathetic nervous system that deals with rest and digest, is our most ancient nervous system. And it tends to just run things, digestion and stuff like that. And then, of course, as we evolved through all the different iterations that we came through, it got more complicated. Breathing came into it, heart rate, all these things became things that happened automatically. We didn't have to think about them because it was too inefficient, and it worked well. And then at the same time, or a little later, the sympathetic nervous system comes in, and that's about vitality, the ability to fight or to flee, to run away. And it had that quality of allowing organisms to be more expansive, to move more, to actually become more creative in many ways. And then here's where Porges really had some fun and took a little deviation from the standard look at this, is that there is a myelinated sheath that goes from around the heart up into the face, the ears, and it's the ventral branch of the parasympathetic nervous system. And where he really began to explore was it allows humans and other mammals to belong to each other, to exist in groups with safety. And so it allowed us to know that it's okay to be in proximity. And this all happens through the face. There's 502 muscles or something, and they all have a function that allows your nervous system to feel, am I safe or am I not safe? And if you feel safe, you can draw close to somebody. And when that happens, there is this event called co-regulation. Our nervous systems begin to tune each other to a place where we feel like we can belong, and that it's okay to be together, and that we can do things. And then in conjunction with the other parts of the nervous system, it allows for vitality and movement and creativity and a sense of well-being and health. And this is the default value. It's what we are sort of evolved to do. Now, as you'll notice, there's a hierarchy to this, and it's a biological hierarchy, a historical hierarchy. And each of the various nervous systems, the early dorsal sympathetic, the sympathetic, and then the ventral, or of the parasympathetic nervous system, evolved so that the ventral, or the social engagement system, is the most recent and the one that our nervous systems prefer. Deb Dana, who's also a therapist and really has done a lot to make this more available. It's our home away from home. It's the home we literally automatically want to go to. Now, under stress, what happens is that we, in a sense, devolve. If we go from connection, belonging, hey, it's okay to be together, everything's all right, we go down to, oh my God, I've either got to fight or run. And you might be an enemy, so I can't trust you. And then things change and become a little more, I'm going to call them primitive in the real sense of the word, earlier. And finally, if that doesn't work, we go down into dorsal, that mechanism, which you've all seen, the story about the mouse caught in the jaws of a cat, and it looks like it's dead. In effect, it's not acting. I mean, the nervous system has literally shut the mouse down. But when the cat gets bored and drops the mouse on the ground and walks away, the mouse pops up and runs off to the hole that it came from. And that's that third, more primitive nervous system. Now, the thing is that we all have this need to protect ourselves, especially in a culture where, well, the news events that came in today, for instance, definitely is a sign of nervous systems that are under threat. And frankly, if we were in a place of regulation or co-regulation, these kind of things could be worked out with some form of reasonableness. Our higher functions would come online. We'd be able to reason and talk and negotiate and stuff. But when we get scared, we drop down into a more primitive nervous system. And then it's, you know, we're going to make a deal, my way or the highway, or do what I say, or I don't trust you, and all these different conditions that come up with that nervous system. And then if that doesn't work, and there's a real danger here, I think you're all aware of, we go further as a culture and as individuals down into dorsal. And suddenly, who cares? I mean, it's all going to blow over. Why bother? And these are all functions of the nervous system in relation to the stories we tell. So an important piece here that Porges named, Deb Dana actually named, is that story follows state. Story follows state. So we think that maybe it's the higher cortical functions that are telling us what we're doing, but they are informed through the lens of your nervous system. For instance, if you're in dorsal, you would have a story I just talked about. Nothing's going to work out. Why bother? Life sucks. And, you know, who cares? That's a very dorsal story. I'm using terms, by the way, that took me a while to get used to, but they help us to talk about it. So later, if you have questions, or the handout I have actually will explain a lot of this. So that's one story, and it's the lens. So that when the mind starts to consider it, it always considers it from that lens. I hope that's clear. Story follows state. If we go to the next state up, evolutionary state up, when we go into sympathetic, or mobilization is actually the term we're using now. So it's not fight or flight, it's energy. But it's, oh, what's in it for me? Look, this is what I'm doing. You do what you're going to do, but here's what I'm going to do. And I can't trust anybody, or I've got to do it all myself. These are all stories that the mind begins to create through the lens of that place of sympathetic activation. And now we move into ventral or social engagement network. And when when our nervous system is in that state where ventral social engagement system is primary, the stories we get are, hey, we can work this out. You know, this is kind of difficult, but I'm sure we can come up with a good solution to it. You know, things are going pretty well today. And these are all stories that the mind is able to create in any given situation through the lens of the nervous system that you're in. Now, I know, for me, this was a lot to digest, and it took a while to get comfortable with it. But this, by the way, this way of looking at it has taken over my field. I mean, almost everybody I know now is talking about how to use this creatively. And to help people heal from trauma, or just be able to live the life they want to live. So when all of this is working, there is something really critical here that, frankly, as a culture, we're going through kind of a shock about, which is in COVID, we lost the ability to congregate. And the essence of our nervous system health is the ability to co-regulate with another human being, or actually another mammal that has a similar nervous system, such as your pets, your dog, or cats are a little different. But and I do have a canary, which I don't know, I have a hard time co-regulating with, but there's something there. But this requirement to co-regulate is what allows us to feel alive and healthy, and it actually has a direct impulse or effect on our general health. Like when we are able to see people with safety, suddenly our bodies start to go into rest, repair, and rejuvenation. Because they aren't, and this is what's really important, they aren't being enlisted in a mode of defense. And what do I mean by that? You know, if you've all seen this scene from the African veldt where I think it's a jaguar is chasing a wildebeest or something, and the wildebeest runs, you know, does all kinds of crazy things, and finally, after a long chase, gets away. The leopard or cheetah gives up, and then the wildebeest wanders off, and then 5 minutes later, it's wagging its tail and chewing grass because it utilized fight flight just for that moment and then went back into rest, repair, and digest. Now, as a culture, one of the things we're doing is we're in a constant state of surveillance for danger. And we do that naturally anyway, but we don't, what we've done is taken parts of our nervous system and used them out of their ordinary function. So that a lot of us are, for instance, anxiety is because a lot of us are scanning the environment for danger. Oh, that's a problem. Oh, that's a problem. I better take care of that. And instead of being in ventral, you know, that place we naturally want to go to, we are in a place where we're protecting ourselves all the time. So the function of vitality or mobilization starts to protect us all the time rather than protecting us a little bit and then giving us a lot of energy to do things that we like to do. And also with dorsal, when we get into dorsal, you could say a lot of depression comes out of that state. So that instead of allowing ourselves to be at rest, to digest, to be comfortable, we disappear from life. We remove ourselves, you know, from the, say, oh, well, who cares? I personally, there's a thing called home away from home, which is the place you're most comfortable with in your nervous system instead of in ventral, which is the place that you are designed to be in. So mine is dorsal, and I do this by reading murder mysteries. I can get a murder mystery. The world can be going to hell in a handbasket. Give me a book and a comfortable chair, and nothing matters. And that's a place of safety and protection for me. The trouble is that it sort of takes away from my ability to be active and having fun in my life. And part of the work that we do with this system is to discover what your home away from home is. For instance, if you happen to have a home away from home that is in mobilization or fight flight, you're always busy, always doing stuff, you know, constantly on the go, and not allowing yourself to go deeply into rest and repair, rest and digest. You know, and all of these different nervous systems, when they're used solely for defense over time, all have, you know, attendant medical complications. Dorsal, of course, would be anything with the digestion. Mobilization would be anything to do with adrenals, with your heart, with all kinds of things like that. When we are in the evolutionary place that we're meant to be in, then the body stops doing all this rest and digest. I mean, stops being defensive and allows the nervous system to do what it's supposed to do, which is give us energy, allow us to rest, digest, and repair. And then we begin to enter into a state of harmony. But we can only do that in the company of others. I know a lot of people think self-control is all about, you know, control yourself is all about moral fortitude or willpower or gumption. In reality, controlling yourself is something you learn through co-regulation with other people. The mother with her child, at some level, is teaching that child's nervous system how to be balanced, how to be fluid, how to respond. And the child, in a safe environment, picks that up. The nervous system begins to understand how it works, and then the child is able to learn more and go into the world without always being in a state of defensiveness. Obviously, in my line of work, I see a lot of people whose childhood wasn't like that, and that they have to relearn how to regulate, and not by being tough, not by having strong willpower. I mean, you can do that, you can control yourself with that, but there's a price to pay because you're not regulating, you're manipulating. So this is pretty interesting stuff on that level. So the essence of this little informational piece is that you already know all about this. You know your nervous system, you've lived with it for a long time. All I'm doing is opening up new language and a little different way to look at it. And in my handout, I have referenced Steve Porges, Deb Dana, and all you have to do is go on YouTube or Google or something, and you can learn all about all the intricacies of this. So what I'd like to do now, let's see, do I have room for a question? I know we're shortish on time. Let me see, anybody? No, good, okay. At least
There
one that
are lots of questions, well, several of them, not lots, but
Okay.
several. So maybe you can just take them as they come.
Well, I was going to jump into a meditation, but let's answer some questions. Let's see.
Yeah, I think let's do questions for a couple of minutes because I don't know how much time we will have after.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, or if you really feel strongly say the questions, then just raise the hand and we'll make sure you unmute you.
Yeah, a big one here is, why are cats different? I don't know. You ever met a cat? They're just a little differently wired. They are, I mean, they are designed for co-regulation, just that they do it in their own way. Okay, I think that's all I'm seeing. Anybody else has a question, you could type it in now, I guess. How about you, Misha? Any questions? I know we've had conversations about this. Some parts we agree and some parts we don't.
Well, I always have a lot of questions, but I think my big question is the co-regulation. We have an objective measures of those things.
Yes.
We know how that gets done. We understand actually what happens when people energetically connect and co-regulate. I also, the reason where I'm going with this, I have seen tremendous co-regulation and enhancement of therapeutic effects in the small groups. And those small groups not necessarily come in a specific flavor. They can be anything. They can be small retreats. They can be a small, like medical shared groups. Could be even meetings like this one,
Yes.
with only 23 of us right now. So I think some magic happens in there when we all lined up in a certain way. It is an objective measure. Of course, it's not really done in the regular settings, but I kind of wonder if at some point it should be done, if we should look into this co-regulation a lot more objectively, whether we use heart rate variability or some other measures. But it could
that's a good point.
It could help participants to get even more benefit when they know they're co-regulating with an experienced facilitator who is capable of really grounding the central nervous system and allow for a much more balanced autonomic response. And this would be a within this polyvagal theory. I think this makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'd love to talk more about heart rate variability and as a measure of state. In fact, if we have time, we'll do a very small meditation now.
But there are other questions that I think are important.
Yeah, one of which I really like is, what if people don't feel safe around other people? That's an excellent question, because it's what it usually implies is that at some point the company of others was used to hurt. That if you were vulnerable and open to a person and then they either betrayed you or attacked you or something, and this was fairly regular, you would automatically begin to suspect, say, a request to be quiet. Oh, just stand and talk to me when there's a party going. Oh yeah, what are you going to do to me now? And so that's Not unusual, and it's got a lot of different flavors to it. You can find lots of reasons why people don't feel safe in the company of others, but it's not because the nervous system doesn't want to be safe or to join. It's just that it takes a little different approach, and the word we use a lot is titration. Very slow moving forward to being connected and beginning to redevelop a trust in another human being, which is, I think even on a national level, that's actually a very big issue. And I think one to be looked at more deeply than it already is. So good question. I like it a lot. Let's see. Yeah, what if you live alone? This is great. Obviously, COVID sort of did that to a whole lot of us. So as a nation, we were deprived of the ability to co-regulate. Now, the good thing is your nervous system, for the most part, doesn't care about the quality of the connection. It just cares about the connection. And you can get it, frankly, just by going to a coffee shop, say, having a cup of coffee and hanging out. And other people's nervous system, beneath the level of their awareness, will automatically tune with yours. And you will get the sense of, oh, I'm with some. Remember, this is like groups of, call them tribes if you want, groups of people that had to band together to be safe, in early evolutionary situations. And your body just loves to be connected, and it will do it. It'll just begin to happen. Now, again, I love that reason. I like the question about what if you don't feel safe around others? You may have to begin to choose where you go to feel safe. A place that feels comfortable. Frankly, set and setting is important for this. It's if a place is beautiful to you, if a place has got a certain kind of security to it, is all for the better. But frankly, just being around people will help you to begin to co-regulate. It'll fill your gas tank, as they say. Let me see. Yeah, introverts. For instance, I'm a extroverted introvert. So being around a lot of people doesn't necessarily recharge me, but being with, I will get something out of that, but I often prefer one-on-one contact. Doesn't mean I don't like, talking to groups, and, I taught for years at Hopkins, and I love being with a class, but there has to be safety and a sense of it's okay to be here doing this. Let's see what else we have. These are fun. I've never been to a Fish concert either. Yeah, this is a fascinating study. Large groupings of people. Now, there's a couple things that can happen here. Probably going to wander off the topic a little, but co-regulation and regulation is our evolutionary intent, and is designed to allow us to feel safe, happy, and healthy. It can be distorted. It can be, frankly, ventral, or the feeling of belonging can be, and we're seeing a lot of that right now in our politics. If there's enough fear and or trauma, I believe you can flip the natural evolutionary order, and that fight, flight, or maybe even dorsal, but fight, flight for sure, can then take on the function of being together. Like, we're going to protect ourselves because if we don't, we're going to die. Now, even though that's a realistic thing at some neurological level, the impulse of ventral is to belong together with safety. So we're not looking for danger. We're looking for, oh, I like you. You have a nice face. I like the sound of your voice. Oh, what nice clothing. It feels good to be with you. That's the quality of ventral. When the belonging together is enlisted through mobilization or sympathetic, it becomes more, do what I say. You'd be okay if you do what I say. If you follow these rules, everything is going to be all right. And that is not a true belonging. That is a belonging based on coercion, and does not fulfill the evolutionary impact of your nervous system. And you can tell, because people will get, increased illness, things including mental illness. So, yeah, it's something that is relatively new. We're talking about it. I just did an interesting dive into, I met a woman from the Maasai tribe in Kenya who was involved with, as a child, she had to go through the process of female genital mutilation. And it was done by the loving people that were around her, by her loving mother and by her aunties and things, as a way to belong to the tribe. So this whole process can be used as a way of belonging, but underneath it, you will see a lot of symptoms that are not about rest, digest, and rejuvenation. You'll see increased amounts of violence, increased gastrointestinal, increased cardiovascular things, all because co-regulation is not happening in an appropriate manner, an evolutionarily appropriate manner. Not about right or wrong. It's about evolution. It's about what we're designed to do. Let's see what else we got. And I'll have to look up fish concert. Oh, and how does one encourage a balanced response to stress after a career in urban law enforcement? This begins to, talk about all kinds of trauma that happen, especially if you're a first responder. There are a lot of explorations of this. The one that stuck with me, I read it years ago, was Native Americans who served in Vietnam. And, that for them, of course, it was a traumatic environment. And when they came home, they were welcomed by the entire tribe or the group of people. And they were dancing and feasting, and there were sweat lodges, and the person was integrated back into the community so that their nervous system, which had to undergo a necessary reversal, where survival was not about looking for signs of connection and belonging, but for signs of danger in everything and responding to that with violence. And the study said that when they went through this process, there was an increased sense that everything was okay again and they could be whole. Now, this is one study and it was years ago, so I'm sure there's lots of stuff that has been going on. But if you are currently in that or have gone through recently, and you do not have clinical PTSD, it's one thing to be traumatized, another thing to have PTSD. Learning how to create a good story. I said story follows state. You start to create stories that make sense to you, and the nervous system can buy it, and the two together create a sense of well-being. One story you might want to possibly come up with: I had a really difficult job. On a daily basis, it was really hard, but I did my best and I handled it really well. Now that's a ventral story. And and this is where we get into noticing the body, what the body's saying, how it's responding, what it's telling you. But having a good story like that and then looking at how the body works and how it begins to reveal itself, what it had to sacrifice in order to do what it had to do and how that was necessary and important, including all the things that went wrong and all the times you didn't do what you thought you should do, but a whole coherent story. That's a great question. I mean, as you can see, we could spend, frankly, months teasing these things out. Let's see. Boy, yeah, workplaces. Thank you. Steve Porges, who did a lot of this research, not just the research, but spreading this thing, worked in academia. And he said, academia is all about judging. So you live in a toxic environment where people are always looking to find fault with you in order to firm up their position. And workplaces could have the same thing. And he said he personally had a skill around that and didn't mind it. But if you didn't, it would be a really difficult place to work. I have no easy answer for how to deal with toxic bosses. I mean, there are lots of information out there about if your boss is toxic or if the environment is toxic. you know, or if your government is toxic. I mean, there's all kinds of things. Yes, thanks. And we have a few minutes. We do. Okay, so I want to do two things that I'm going to close the chat for me. Okay, two breaths. Breath is your most important vehicle to accessing your nervous system. And the first breath that we're going to do is a 4-7 breath. And this breath can be used to either turn off the vagal brake or put the vagal brake on. Now, what's the vagal brake? It's the ability of that ventral vagal sheath to begin to determine whether or not the sympathetic nervous system picks up speed, that is, you know, adrenaline, cortisol, and you start to mobilize more, or it needs to slow down. And breathing is your best bet, most accessible. Now, if you go online, there's 100 different breaths people are putting out there. I like to keep it simple. So 4-7, and 4 is 4 in, 7 out. Now let's do that for just a minute. And I know this is truncated, but I'd love to say relax, but as you know, that's a little harder than it looks. By the way, just a quick snippet. It's hard to meditate if you are not in a state of ventral, your nervous system is in ventral, enlisting dorsal so that you can immobilize with safety. Otherwise, if you stay still, you'll be scanning for threat if you don't go to ventral, if you stay in, say, for mobilization. So if you want to sit still for a long time, go into that most evolutionarily current nervous system, and it will, in conjunction with dorsal, allow you to immobilize. But here we're gonna slow the body down a little bit, put the brake on the sympathetic nervous system so there's not as much activation. Let's just do it for about a minute. So breathe in 4 and out 7. And if you want to, you can match it with your heartbeat, but you don't have to. Now you're your own best source of information. So just watch and see if anything happens as you breathe in 4 and breathe out 7. Now, if we had more time, I'd ask you for your responses, but we're out of time. Let me share one last practice with you, which is a regulation practice, which it helps to tone your nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, at least the parasympathetic. And by tone, I mean its ability to be responsive and fluid, so it can respond to things rapidly, either move into safety, move out of safety into mobilization, but you have the ability to be fluid and to have more choices about how you respond to things. And this is a really simple one. It's you breathe out for 5.5 seconds. No, I mean 5 seconds. And you breathe in for 5 seconds. Now, I have a fairly complicated breathing pattern that I do around this, but all you have to do really is 5 in and then 5 out. Okay, and you can get more complicated with this, but again, I like to keep it simple. And the other thing is keep working on good stories. There's about an 80-20 information exchange. 80% of the nervous system goes to the brain, and about 20% of the information comes from the brain to the nervous system, but it's an important 20%. Like in the beginning, you were talking about being optimistic about what's going on in our current government, the glass half full or half empty. glass half full is a good story. So work on those stories, tune it to your breathing, and your nervous system, by the way, will just do its job. You don't have to work too hard once you get it going. So thank you for listening to me. I know it, again, this is a 6-hour talk, and I love that you paid attention and that you let
Well,
me
what I
back
think
away.
what we should do is we should bring you back. I think I wish that next time when you come, the folks will benefit from your profound teachings more as a guide for practices, and we'll do a little longer practice. But I think it sounds like there's enough questions to continue this conversation, and I think it is a very important conversation, which of course
It is. I love it that people respond to it because it, A, my nervous system likes it. And B, I'm also very excited about this information because it gives us a new way, not a new way, an old way to look at how to become humans. You know, that's what we
so
are.
with that, let's wrap up. Janet, thank you, Jack, so much. Janet, who do we have next week?
Next week we have Reza Ektafor
Great.
and Devi, who is with
Great.
CM.
So we're continuing senior teachers in Sufi lineage. So
Oh, Davey. Oh,
if he's going to be there next Friday, so that's good. So you're for a different type of conversation, but in certain similarities.
oh yeah, a lot of similarities.
Lots of similarities. We'll see everybody next Friday. If you're my patient, you need to ask me something. Stay here. I'll be here for about 10 minutes.
Yep.
Otherwise, Janet will stop the recording and we will see you all soon. By the way, there's